Tonight at 10, the latest terror attack in France leaves an elderly priest murdered and others injured. It happened at a church in northern France when two men armed with knives took a group of people hostage. So-called Islamic State said it was responsible. Father Jacques Hamel was 85. One of his attackers was already known to police for attempting to visit Syria.
When I saw them, I said to myself, well, that's it. It's over. They were so motivated. You Christians, you kill us. They cried a little bit.
President Hollande expressed his sympathy and solidarity with the community and declared that France would stand united. And it's now emerged that one of the attackers was on probation at the time of the attack. Also tonight, Ofcom wants BT Openreach to become a separate company to provide faster and better broadband across the UK. We have a special report from the coast of Libya, where migrant numbers are on the rise once again. The husband of a woman from Bradford claims that she was the victim of a so-called honour killing by her family in Pakistan.
They were threatening us because she got married out of the family with her own will, which they didn't like.
And Michelle Obama does everything she can to convince Democrats to back Hillary Clinton.
In the south, the army antics that led to a duel with flare guns and a fire at their barracks. And the mother who lost her legs to meningitis as a teenager says vaccines should be offered to all children.
Good evening. France has suffered yet another attack carried out by men claiming to be part of so-called Islamic State. An elderly priest was killed when the attackers, armed with knives, took people hostage in a church near the northern city of Rouen. Both hostage takers were later shot dead by anti-terror police. One of them was known to security services, having twice been arrested on his way to Syria, and was on probation at the time of the attack. Our correspondent Lucy Williamson has the latest.
This scene has become shorthand here for horror. Today the sirens were sounding for the dead and wounded of St Etienne's church, for an elderly priest and a handful of nuns and worshippers, knifed during their morning service by two men claiming to wage their version of a holy war. They entered by the back door carrying knives and a fake bomb and began their assault with the priest. As they did so, one of the nuns, Sister Danielle, managed to escape.
When I saw them, I said to myself, well, that's it. It's over. They were so motivated. You Christians, you kill us. They cried a little bit.
Father Jacques Hamel was 86 years old. One of his sermons here captured on this video from several years ago. After cutting him across the throat and chest, his attackers stepped outside the church and were shot dead by police. In Paris today, the prosecutor named one of those attackers as 19-year-old Adel Khamish.
A signalé la disparition du jeune homme, disparition qu'il venait de constater.
After two attempts to reach Syria, he said, the teenager was fitted with an electronic bracelet this year and put under partial house arrest. Today, this attack formed a bridge between president and public. But this was an act designed to start a war, create division. An act the president linked very quickly to so-called Islamic State, also known as Daesh.
The threat remains high, very high. This is what we've lived through over the past few days, even the past few years. Daesh has declared war against us. We must face up to this war, by all means, whilst respecting the rule of law.
This was a local attack in a national battle, whose targets have, one by one, described the pillars of French identity, its values, its lifestyle, the Republic, and now the Catholic Church. As police raided several addresses tonight, one young man has been arrested, said to be carrying the attacker's ID. The menace France is battling has so many faces: copycats, jihadists, the angry and the easily led. Each time, leaders here argue a little more over how to beat it, and each time it happens again.
That was Lucy Williamson reporting there. Well, Pope Francis has condemned what he called a barbarous killing. He is on his way to Krakow in Poland for Roman Catholic World Youth Day, and our correspondent Tom Burridge is there. We'll talk to Tom in just a moment. But first, let's join Lucy, who's in Rouen. Lucy, just a thought on the latest security update there to do with what security services knew about one of these attackers.
That's right. I think that confidence in France's security services has taken quite a knock recently. You might remember earlier this month a parliamentary inquiry criticising intelligence services for not coordinating the monitoring of suspects. And now, when it comes to this suspected attacker, Adel Kamish, it seems as if the prosecutor's office had asked for him to remain in detention after he was arrested for trying to go to Syria. That decision was overruled by a judge. 4 months later, it takes on quite a different hue.
Lucy, thanks very much. Let's join Tom in Krakow. I'm saying that the Pope is on his way there, Tom. Your thoughts on how today's dreadful events in Rouen might affect that papal visit to Poland?
Well, Hugh, this is a huge event for the Catholic Church, but Pope Francis will arrive here among some sadness and bewilderment over the killing. And I think when it comes to the Pope's public statements, there will be a change in emphasis. People will be looking to him to confront and talk about that issue of extremist Islamist ideology and the violence it has been able to inspire in Europe. And I think people will be looking also in a wider sense. Although the two men who carried out the attack in France today were not refugees, we expect the Pope to confront the issue of immigration. And an attack on a train in Germany last week was carried out by a young asylum seeker. So when the Pope talks about that wider issue of immigration, it'll be interesting to see whether he can balance his usual humanity approach of welcoming genuine refugees and asylum seekers into Europe, but at the same time addressing people's genuine concerns about what that means for security. And that last argument has been used by right-wing conservative governments in Europe, like the government here in Poland, as a reason to why there should be less immigration into the EU. People will be looking for a nuanced, clever response from the Pope on a very sensitive issue.
OK, Tom, thanks very much again. Tom Burridge there in Krakow, and thanks to you, Lucy, in Rouen tonight. Now, Ofcom, the telecom regulator, has rejected calls for the company which runs Britain's broadband infrastructure to be split up. But it is recommending that BT Openreach should nonetheless be separated from BT, and it says the changes will mean that more people will receive a fast, more reliable service. Critics say that the performance of BT Openreach has long been unsatisfactory, as our industry correspondent John Moylan tells us.
Oh, it's impossible. I can't work.
Ian Firth wanted to run his property firm from home today, but he couldn't. His broadband in Somerset is unreliable. So he has to go elsewhere, to a rented office 9 miles away, just to get online, and he blames BT.
4 or 5 years ago it wasn't a problem for me because technology wasn't as advanced as it is today. Now we're dealing with large file sizes, and it means having to have a decent connection to actually manage the business. As a result, I'm losing time and money, and it's purely, in my view, down to British Telecom's failure to invest in their infrastructure.
BT towers over the UK's internet scene because companies like TalkTalk and Sky have to use BT's Openreach network in order to get their customers online. Now, critics say that structure has been holding back the rollout of high-speed services. In the UK, just 2% of households and businesses have ultra-fast broadband, provided by fibre running right up to the doorstep. Now, that compares with 70% in Japan. So Openreach will become a legally separate company in what's being called the biggest shake-up in a decade. It will remain part of BT, but it will make decisions in the interests of all its customers. Some say that's just burying the issue. Here in York, TalkTalk and Sky have resorted to laying their own trial network. They wanted Openreach to be sold off.
I don't think that legally separating Openreach goes far enough, because you're dependent on detailed regulation, lots of lawyers poring all over what BT can and can't do. Whereas if you properly separate, create Openreach PLC, there's no need for all that complicated regulation, and it's very clear how much money Openreach are making and how much they're investing in improving our broadband.
BT says it plans to invest £6 billion in better broadband in the coming years, and it insists that breaking up the company isn't the answer.
There is no evidence anywhere around the world that structural separation works. In fact, the few countries that have done it have led to chaos in many cases, prices going up, no additional choice for customers.
These reforms are meant to deliver a step change in customer service and make the UK a world-leading digital economy. For many households and businesses, that can't come soon enough. John Moylan, BBC News.
2016 could become the worst year to date for migrant deaths, according to figures released by the International Organization for Migration. It says more than 3,000 migrants and refugees have lost their lives so far this year trying to cross the Mediterranean, more than 1,000 more than at this stage last year. And most of those who died set out from Libya, which is now the main departure point for the smugglers' vessels. The Libyan Coast Guard is really struggling to cope. Our Middle East correspondent Ola Gerin has been out on one of their missions, and she sent us this special report.
As the sun goes down, we set out with the Tripoli Coast Guard, facing the perils of the Mediterranean, which has claimed so many. This inflatable, battered by the waves, is their only seaworthy vessel. From their fleet of 4, 3 need repairs. Later, in pitch darkness, they're on the lookout for migrants in distress. Not easy without night vision goggles. All they can do is listen for their vessels. It's 1:30 in the morning and we're in a stretch of water where smugglers' boats pass regularly, usually between 1 and 3. Now the engine is off here, the lights are off. The Coast Guard don't want to alert anyone to their presence. But if a rescue is needed here tonight, they have just this one small vessel. With daybreak, a clear horizon, this time, but they say it's the traffickers who rule the waves.
The smugglers have more boats and more weapons. They have long-range guns. They can escort the migrants to European waters, and we can't do anything to stop them. The state doesn't support us. We haven't been paid since March.
And Coast Guard officials say there's another problem further out to sea, just beyond Libyan territorial waters, Operation Sophia. They say the EU mission, supposed to shut down smuggling routes, is ferrying migrants to Italy like a taxi. There's agreement from a smuggler now detained, who the authorities say is a big fish.
The operation saved life and it encouraged people to travel more. The rescue, they are very close to Libya.
So they think these ships will pick them up quickly?
Quickly.
When you were arranging for these people to get on these overcrowded boats and go to Europe, did you ever stop to think that they could die on the way?
No, because we always pray for them, you know.
But here's how they send them to sea. The Coast Guard coming to rescue this overloaded vessel last month. Pregnant women among those scrambling for places. So many crammed on board, some of the crew had to sit on top of the cabin. And this is what awaits those saved by the Coast Guard: detention back in Libya. Even for women and children. The youngest not spared, Mahmoud, is just 21 days old. Several of those here told us they wouldn't risk the crossing again, but the Coast Guard say they have rescued some migrants 5 or 6 times. For the men and boys, even worse conditions. The authorities say they're doing their best with scarce resources amidst the chaos of Libya.
I brought up 2010.
This 14-year-old from Gambia told us his brother was caught and deported in 2010. Still, he came here all alone, hoping to find work in Europe. Many we met were economic migrants, trapped in what amounts to a teeming prison.
We all share the same two toilets. Two toilets we have here that we share.
For hundreds of people?
Yeah, for hundreds of people under the same roof here. It's really unnormal here. We have here 3 months and my other fellow Gambians have 4 months here.
Yeah, we want to go home. Almost 6 months now.
Some are on the move, more than 160 men heading to the airport. Instead of the new life they craved, being deported back to Gambia. Others, like Betty from Nigeria, still look to the Mediterranean for salvation. She's waiting for a call from the traffickers. She knows some who set out from here wash up on the beaches, but she says her only chance of a better life is to risk death at sea. Orla Guerin, BBC News, Tripoli.
The plight of migrants on the Libyan coast. Their special report by our correspondent Orla Guerin. Now, in Japan, a man is being questioned by police after 19 people were stabbed to death in a care home for people with mental disabilities. 25 others were injured. The suspect worked at the centre until February, when it said that he wrote a letter to Parliament saying that disabled people should be killed. In the latest stage of the race for the White House, Bernie Sanders has urged Democrats to back Hillary Clinton. In his speech to the party convention in Philadelphia, many of his supporters expressed their opposition to Hillary Clinton, though they later gave a rapturous response to a speech by Michelle Obama, who told delegates to embrace Hillary Clinton and reject the values of Donald Trump. Let's join our North America editor, John Sopel, who's in Philadelphia for us tonight.
Hugh, thank you very much. Yes, in the next few moments they will start the roll call state, one state after another, conducting the vote, which will see Hillary Clinton nominated as the Democratic candidate. The Bernie Sanders supporters and Never Hillary camp have been out in force again this afternoon, making a lot of noise, and they'll continue to do that throughout the evening. More concerning for Hillary Clinton is that that voice is echoed in the country. She needs to win over those people. But last night, it was the big guns of the Democratic Party getting behind Hillary Clinton. To angry Bernie Sanders supporters, this probably wasn't the best approach from actress and comedian Sarah Silverman.
Can I just say to the Bernie or bust people, you're being ridiculous.
But the person who did manage to simultaneously unite and electrify the convention was the First Lady, Michelle Obama.
I wake up every morning in a house that was built by slaves. And I watch my daughters, two beautiful, intelligent black young women, playing with their dogs on the White House lawn. And because of Hillary Clinton, my daughters and all our sons and daughters now take for granted that a woman can be president of the United States.
And she took this shot at Donald Trump's Make America Great Again.
Don't let anyone ever tell you that this country isn't great, that somehow we need to make it great again, because this right now is the greatest country on earth.
But now it was Bernie Sanders' turn to bring his mutinous army into line.
Any objective observer will conclude that based on her ideas and her leadership, Hillary Clinton must become the next president of the United States.
But nearly all other mentions of Hillary Clinton were met with jeers from sections of the audience.
I'm not going to support her because she's a war hawk, because she's a liar, and because she's a bad person.
Would you rather have Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton?
It doesn't matter.
They're dumb. That's all I can say. They're stupid. And then they're booing every time Hillary Clinton's name come up.
Polls suggest that 90% of Bernie Sanders supporters will back Hillary in November, but those that won't are making a lot of noise. John Sopel, BBC News, Philadelphia.
A woman from Bradford has been the victim of a so-called honour killing, according to her husband. 28-year-old Samir Shahid died on a visit to her ancestral village in Pakistan last week. Her family denies that allegation, but the husband has told the BBC that they never approved of her marriage, and he claims that they then took matters into their own hands. Our correspondent Danny Savage has the story.
They got married 2 years ago in Leeds, but now she is dead, and her husband says he doesn't believe what her family is telling him about her death. Samir Shahid was 28 years old and died in Pakistan last week.
They were threatening us because she got married out of the family with her own will, which they didn't like.
Her husband, who she lived with in Dubai, claims she was the victim of a so-called honour killing because her family didn't approve of the relationship.
Then the father told the police that she had committed suicide. How can she commit a suicide? She was really happy. She was really excited. She wanted to come back to Dubai. I don't trust the reports he's giving.
She went to Pakistan to visit sick relatives. They organised a post-mortem examination, but admit the cause of death is unclear. Back in Bradford, where Samir grew up, her local MP has written to the Prime Minister of Pakistan.
Honour crimes are commonplace in Pakistan, which is why I took the step to write to the Prime Minister. That's not something I would have done lightly, because I want to ensure his commitment.
This is where Samir and Syed got married in September 2014. She had recently separated from her first husband, who was a cousin in Pakistan. Her family strongly deny the allegations being made against them, but the authorities in Islamabad are coming under pressure to thoroughly investigate Samir Shahid's death. Her uncle says the claims are lies and they don't recognise her second husband.
What I've seen on media today, this is totally wrong, absolutely wrong. There's no such a thing. And this person would pretend to be husband. That is wrong. It is nothing to not heard of him.
Tonight, West Yorkshire Police confirmed that a family member was warned about harassing Samir when she returned home to Bradford last year. This is about claims and counterclaims. What did happen to this 28-year-old when she went to her family home in Pakistan? Danny Savage, BBC News, Leeds.
Scientists at Nottingham University say they're confident that cloned animals do not age prematurely, and it's raised hopes that cloning, as part of medical research, might lead to major advances. The first animal clone from an adult cell, known as Dolly the sheep, died prematurely, but researchers say that her 4 cloned siblings are in good health. Our science editor David Schuckman has more details.
Researchers at Nottingham University conducting a highly unusual experiment. In this scanner lies a very special sheep, one that's been cloned. And the aim is to find out if cloning produces animals that age more rapidly than normal. It's the first investigation of its kind. Because cloning involves taking DNA from one animal and planting it inside the egg of another, the worry is that the newborn might start life with a body that's older than it should be. That seemed to be what happened to Dolly, who became the first mammal to be cloned 20 years ago. Her joints showed signs of failing, as they would in a sheep that was much older.
Dolly was diagnosed with osteoarthritis in her stifle, so in her knee joints at a relatively young age, and the concern therefore was, because osteoarthritis becomes more common in older people, older animals, the concern was, is Dolly older than we think she is?
To understand if the cloned sheep were old before their time, researchers looked at 3 of the conditions that come with aging in sheep and in humans. So, circulation and blood pressure, they seemed fine. General metabolism and the threat of diabetes, also no problem. And the health of the joints, the osteoarthritis that Dolly had. Well, of the 13 cloned sheep that were studied, only 1 had problems. And that could mean that for us, any treatments involving stem cells created by cloning might have a better chance of proving effective. 4 sheep cloned from the same genetic material that created Dolly. They do look amazingly similar, and crucially, their health is perfectly normal. And the scientists involved in the study say that's potentially valuable for us.
It actually opens up opportunities, for various therapies for humans in the future. We can create stem cells perhaps in the future that can be used for therapeutic purposes and be confident that those cells will be perfectly normal.
There's still a high failure rate with cloning, and there are easier ways to make stem cells. But a technique once thought to herald a brave and perhaps dangerous new world can produce animals that lead normal lives. David Shrookman, BBC News.
A production company behind the latest Star Wars film has admitted health and safety breaches after an accident involving the actor Harrison Ford. The 74-year-old, who played Han Solo, broke his leg on the set at Pinewood Studios 2 years ago when he was struck by a metal door. The production company, Foodles, which is owned by Disney, will be sentenced next month. So just 10 days to go before the Olympic Games in Rio, and one of Team GB's leading competitors is the cyclist Jason Kenny. He's already won 3 Olympic gold medals, and if he adds to the tally in Rio, he'll join a very select number of British sports stars to have won 4 Olympic golds. Andy Swiss has the latest in our series looking at the ones to watch.
3 golds, 2 games, 1 sensational cyclist.
Kenny is the Olympic sprint champion. He wins the gold medal.
London 2012 propelled Jason Kenny to Olympic greatness. But what happens when the crowds have gone and the gloss starts to fade? Well, for Kenny, it proved an agonising question. Rediscovering his motivation, he told me, was one of his toughest battles yet.
It was, yeah, it was horrible, to be honest, because you come off the form of your life, going faster than ever. And then you kind of come crashing back down to earth, to an empty velodrome on kind of average kit and going slow again. So it is difficult to kind of soak that up.
By this spring, though, and the World Championships, Kenny was back on track. But this highest of achievers still has a less than high profile. Remarkably, he still has no personal sponsor.
I'd love to get paid more, but at the end of the day, if people don't want to sponsor me, then that's just the way it is, I just learned to accept that now, and we're in competition with, all the pretty athletes and all your Tom Daley's and people like that, and who I would never be able to compete with when it comes to like a marketing point of view.
Do you quite like being under the radar in some ways?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I couldn't think of anything worse than being a celebrity.
His relationship, though, with fellow cyclist Laura Trott has attracted the spotlight. The pair are engaged and will both be in Rio. Good news for them, if not for their pets.
We have to find someone to look after the dogs when we're away. Whereas if one of us wasn't at the Olympics, it would be a lot easier. But yeah, generally speaking, we support each other as best we can. I guess it's nice to be able to actually see each other out there and spend time with each other in the village as well.
Who'll be the calmer come the Olympics?
Oh, me by miles, absolutely by miles. Laura loves to stress about stuff. She worries more than enough for both of us, so I don't have to worry about anything. If I had to retire tomorrow, I could retire and be happy with what I've achieved. But obviously you can never have too many medals, I don't think. So we'll be going to hopefully add to the collection.
And if he does, an already glittering career will be shining even brighter. Andy Swiss, BBC News.
The first round-the-world flight by a solar-powered plane has been successfully completed. The Solar Impulse has landed in Abu Dhabi 26,000 miles and 16 months after starting its journey there. It made 16 stops on the way, but without using a drop of fuel. So before we leave you tonight, we're going to have a look at some of the memorable moments from the flight, and there is some flash photography coming up.
You are clear to proceed, Marcus. All the best from the whole team. Have a good flight.
In an adventure like this one, you have a lot of unknown, a lot of unexpected, of unpredictable.
when you fly several days and several nights, you start to use your cockpit as your little house in the sky, and it's magical. We have dared to fail, and when you dare to fail, you can succeed.
Yes, some images there from the first round-the-world flight by a solar-powered plane. Time to tell you that Newsnight's coming up on BBC Two. Here's Kirsty.
Tonight, we're in the town in Normandy where the barbarous terror attack claimed by IS left an elderly priest dead in his church. But when President Hollande insists we will win this war, what can a democratic state actually do? Join me now on BBC Two.
That's Newsnight with Kirsty here on BBC One. It's time for the news where you are. Have a good night.